Hello, welcome back. We have learned how we can send HTTP requests to Sina Weibo Open API and get data from it in the last video. We will implement with Python the operations we did in the last video. First, let's have a quick review that how we can send HTTP request with our Firefox HTTP requester plugin. As we can see, we have sent the HTTP request with get method and this URL and with those kind of parameters. Now let's dive into notebook and see how we can implement it with Python. Okay, let's create another notebook. Let's call it 3 and Sina weibo. The first step, we're going to import the tools we may need in the following operation. So let's import pandas as PD, and we will import the URL lib request to send HTTP request, and we also need a JSON lib to pass the response result. As we can see in the last video, the response was a JSON file, as you can see over here. So we will use this library to pass the result. Okay, let's run this cell. Now the second step, we will define a class to wrap up the request to Sina weibo. So here we're going to say class and Sina weibo requester, and we have defined the initial function. The initial function is a self, and here we have a property called the base URL, so that we can keep the URL and using the further request. So we will say base URL, and we can copy it from the HTTP request because we have already confirmed it was work. So we copy it from here, and this part was the API, so we will use the API over here. So in the future, when we use this base URL, we can replace the API so that we can call other APIs. And as we did in the last video, actually they have other parameters like page, and we will leave it here, page, and the count, we'll say equals to count. Here is ant. Okay, so now let's define a function to send the actual request. Let's say define, maybe just say send a request, and here we give it self, and API is definitely for sure, and for page and count we may give some default value. Here page is 1 and count is the count is maybe 15. Now we can use the URL lib request to send HTTP request. We can do in this way: URL lib request and URL open, and then we will use our self base URL because currently we didn't actually pass the APIs to replace in this string, so we need to replace those values over here. So we're going to use format. Here we say API is equal to API. This API is this API, and the second API is from the current argument or parameter over here, and same thing to the following parameters. Page is equal to page, and count is equal to count. Now, after we send the request, we will get the response. So we will store the result of response into another variable. Let's call it response, maybe in this way. Okay. At the last video, we can say the response result was a JSON. So maybe first step, we're going to get the response and maybe decode into charset or UTF-8. So we can say response is equal to, we will going to decode them. So response, and let's say read. We'll read the response stream, and now decode it. First, we can decode them as a response itself charset or UTF-8. So we can do in this way. Response in for chars get a parameter charset. Or we can decode them as UTF-8. UTF-8. And after we decode them, we will use JSON library to pass the result. So we can do in this way. Data is equal to JSON loads the decoded result. Response. Okay, let's try to run this cell and see whether the class have been defined successfully. Okay, so far so good. Now let's try to use above class. So the first step, we can new instance of the class. So we can say Sina is equal to Sina weibo requester, and then we can call the function. Say Sina and send a request. We can just copy it from that. Now we can pass Sina weibo API to this function so that we can concatenate to this string, and then we can send the request with this URL lib. This was the API, so let's copy it. Let's copy it and paste over here. We will store the result into another variable. Let's say that status JSON. Let's run it. Okay, seems the request was successful. Let's try to print the result out to confirm it. Oh, there are nothing here. Oh, there is no return to the in this function, so we will say return data. Redefine this class, resend the request, and print the result out. Okay, we have successfully sent a request to the Sina weibo API and get the result from the Sina weibo. We've got the response. As we can see, we probably get a total 15 count of weibo, and the JSON result has been received. Okay, that's all for this video. We will try to parse the result and install some of the data may be valuable to us into our database in the next video. So see you in the next video.